We are now recording, which is awesome. I love the way Zoom does that. So one of those folks who is without doubt, just doing incredible work in the space of sovereignty is Tom Woodfin. He's the founder of Perception Architecture, and I'll get him to explain a little more about how he considers that to be and what that may mean. And the piece that I really am excited to share with you is it's rare that I come across someone whose list of credentials isn't quite the right word, but I guess kind of skill sets that you've embodied, Tom, makes me sit up and go, like this is not just some guy who's got some fluff and has managed to put some slick marketing together to sound awesome. There's some real substance here, and that's always exciting to me. However, Tom, before we dive into all of that, by way of awesome introduction, I want to start in a little bit of a kind of a little strange place. I want to start with the question, the ultimate warrior.
Oh,
now may or may not have seen a YouTube video of you doing something quite devastating. Do you want to just let the listeners know what they'd have seen if they tuned into the same video that I watched?
Which are you referring to, the Rappler article, or was it was it the highlight reel video?
It would have been a highlight reel, yeah, I believe. There was a fairly highlight in
right. There. Okay, so that was my MMA career. And jiu-jitsu, like fighting jiu-jitsu and Thai boxing as well. Like I wouldn't say I was necessarily a particularly high-level fighter. We got some echo there.
No, we're all good. We're good. I'm just trying to put you up a bit. Producer Andy might come in. So the highlight reel I saw was you in your kind of competing MMA fighting type days.
Yeah, right. So I started that when I was around about 24, I think. I think I came into it quite late. But it was I think it was really useful for me to build confidence, and I got into it because I didn't feel particularly confident on the inside, and I think I just wanted to be a tough guy and maybe show off a bit. And it got me into that, which was good. Then I noticed it wasn't really changing me on the inside as much. Like I felt certainly a bit more confident, but it wasn't really. I think it was no replacement for the inner work that I ended up kind of moving towards, like meditation, therapy, inner dance, this kind of stuff. But yeah,
okay. So we'll come to that. And I mean, but dear listeners, and to those who might be watching this either on Tom's YouTube channel or mine later on, dude, you put the man down. I mean, that's all I'm going to say. That was a fairly impressive takedown. That was one of those, like, in I guess kind of martial arts terms, that was the ultimate mic drop. But one kick, and that was done. So yeah, pretty impressive. Not something I'd like to encounter.
I think, to be honest, like, it's funny, that moment, that was probably like the highlight of my career, that particular knockout. I didn't get like a lot of knockouts. I was better at grappling, to be honest. But that particular one, it was funny. Like, I remember the moment that it happened, and I remember this tiny little voice. It was like jubilation. You get kind of a real high from something like that, and then everybody cheering and chanting your name, and it's quite it's compelling, but I remember this tiny little voice when it happened. It was like, it just whispered to me, it's like, this is the peak. And after that, it all started to it just started to like unravel a bit slowly. Like, I felt like I lost my drive a bit. I felt like I lost my fire for it, and it was not. So I was training still quite hard, and I still was winning fights at first, but then after that, it just started to go a bit more downhill. And it was, I don't know what it was. It was just, I suppose it was like something inside that was saying, like, this isn't it. Like, this isn't the thing for you necessarily, the path to follow.
Yeah, that certainly makes sense. And hearing you say there that, like, it gave you what you sought out from it in some levels, which is this transformation in confidence, and kind of allowing you to step into a different identity almost.
Right.
And if we look at the archetypal journey, and I'm sure we're going to kind of share more on that shortly, but in so many movies, great myths, there's a period of training for the young warrior. as they almost kind of mark that transition from, like adolescent boy to adolescent man. Right. And the kind of the confidence and the kind of like feeling like they can take on the world. And it can often be that confidence that gets them to the point of hubris, where actually they realize what it really takes to mix it in the real world, so to speak. But it feels like a really essential part of the journey. This, almost stepping into your own power, not yet quite knowing what to do with that power, and also realizing perhaps that it's not, that power is not the ultimate end game, if you like. It's just a stage on the journey. How does that all land for you as in those reflections?
Well, I think it's true. Like, I came from a kind of I suppose, like you would say, like a nice guy paradigm, but I think I had a lot of anger like built up inside, and I think I missed out largely on that. You talk about like rites of passage and initiations and things, and like mine was just, I don't know. I thought I will go into drinking because that seems like really fun, and if you can kind of be the most extreme in that way, then that's almost like kind of proving yourself. And I think for young guys today particularly, there's that big onus on like how are you going to prove yourself, and maybe it's how much can you drink, and then maybe it's like how well can you fight. And I think that stuff was really valuable for me to go through in a way. I'm not necessarily condoning or recommending it, but it's almost like I kind of went through to exhaust that to the end. And I feel like it did help me work out a lot of anger, but it didn't give me what I was looking for. I don't know what it is. It's like, I guess I was just a bit sensitive, or there was something else on the inside that was like a voice that just kept getting louder, that this wasn't necessarily for me. But I'm sometimes a bit stubborn, so like it took me a while to actually tune into that and really pay attention to it. With maybe a few disasters along the way, and then eventually you start to pay attention. It's like, all right, okay, gotta listen.
Yeah, I know that well. I can't remember what was happening, but I just that kind of whole drinking life. There came a point around 25, 26 where I was just like, I think I'm done here. Like I felt like I'd drunk enough for 6 lifetimes, and I haven't really touched it since. It's just doesn't hold any appeal to me. But it's interesting you said there was a lot of anger, and this dive into the martial arts allowed you to almost kind of be able to embody that in a healthy way. And it wasn't the whole picture, but it was a part of it. And if we look at the kind of the 4 archetypes, the king, warrior, magician, and lover, or sovereign, warrior, magician, and lover. And each of those, I think I mentioned on a previous conversation we had, that each of those has, in one of the models I've been trained in, like a gateway emotion or emotion that goes with it. And the warrior is all about anger, about using that anger in a clean, healthy way to say, actually, no, this is the boundary that I hold here. This is what's not okay for me, or this is what I take a stand for. And so it's interesting that you kind of, even in, I'm not even sure that you're aware of that, but you give voice to this idea that there is this archetypal connection to kind of anger, and on some level being able to embody that warrior archetype healthily.
Yes. Well, yeah, I mean, I started to embody it. I was still really crap at boundaries, though. I was still like really bad at boundaries. And so I think that stuff actually came quite late, but definitely finding an outlet. It was actually MMA that kind of got me to give up drinking, because after a while I was out in the Philippines at the time, and me and my friend, we had this small bar that we were running, and it's like, that's quite a good way to give up drinking. It's interesting you mentioned it got kind of boring. It was a similar thing for me. It was just like really, like, I felt like I'd exhausted all of the avenues that I could get drunk, like the different ways to get drunk. And then MMA came along, and it was like I found something better. It was like substituting drinking for, I suppose, like controlled violence in a way. That was something that really felt like it could like harness my aggression a bit more. And so I did start to have that embodied sense of what that was like, but I wasn't really like, I guess I didn't know how to translate that into like boundaries and what that meant. And I think I still carry a lot of shame about it, even while I was doing it. It's like, I think anger and shame have been or feeling shame about feeling anger and expressing it has always been like a big deal, and it's something that I've kind of worked on over time.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And so you mentioned earlier this kind of nice guy paradigm, and in listening to your own podcast, I really took a lot of value from your two discussions on this kind of idea of No More Mr. Nice Guy, which is a very famous book. You'll be able to quote the author's name better than I. I know it's Robert, begins with G, Glover or Grover. But I'd love for you to just speak a bit about what you understand the nice guy archetype almost to be, and your own journey with it, because it feels like a really important conversation in this time of kind of like, I guess, like wokeness and inclusivity. We also need to recognize that there can be a shadow to all of this, and so it feels like a really important archetype to explore. If you'd be willing to kind of share your perspectives on it.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I think, as Dr. Glover talks about, is like it kind of originated, he thinks, with the kind of the nice girl syndrome, and then became a male phenomenon as well. And he says it's like essentially codependency, and it's kind of like people pleasing. So you're not like quote unquote nice per se. It's more kind of dishonest. You just sacrifice your authentic expression to people please, so that people don't get mad at you. And then I suppose it's like your childhood adaptation. Like if I just can make sure that everybody around me is happy, then I'll live a problem-free life and I'll get my need for love met and all this kind of thing. But obviously, in reality, I think nice guys tend to be filled with a lot of resentment and bitterness because they're not really looking after themselves and expressing themselves authentically, or in touch with their needs, or really taking responsibility for getting those needs met. And there's a lot of covert contracts. Like, if I do this nice thing for you, I'm not going to tell you, but I want you to love me in return, or like meet my need for love in return, which then obviously they don't know, the other person doesn't know that that's the contract. And so if they don't meet your need for love in return, you start to feel bitter and resentful, and it starts to kind of well up inside of you. And yeah, there was all that kind of juicy stuff going on.
And it's, it's really been, also like, I don't think something I'm really curious about. One of the things I've dived into in the last, 6 months or so is a real understanding of the significance of the journey of those who've been to boarding school. And I have a hunch, and I need to kind of dive into this a bit more, but that, the experience of boarding school may well almost like churn out nice guys on steroids, kind of like that they will do anything to fit into a given situation. And whatever, but the last thing they're going to do is truly express their authentic self, because like there's been heaps and heaps of kind of like layers of don't do that because it's really dangerous. So I'm really curious. I've not yet got any firm conclusions on that, and just it's a little hunch I have. I'm like, I wonder, just in conversations with a few of the men that I've been working with around this idea, to go, there could be something here. So that's my kind of thoughts at the moment, as it pertains to myself and in my own journey as well. Moments where the very opposite of what I thought I should do is the thing that my partner has most wanted. Like, there's been times you just be like, well, just say what you mean, say what you want. Like, and there's me like terrified to be like, but I can't say what I actually want. And over the last 3 months, really the journey to kind of, and listen to your podcast around this idea of nice guys really brought it together, because I'm like, that's what I've really been letting go of here. Is this kind of giving up of my own needs to the point where I won't even speak of them. I daren't speak of them. Actually then go, no, like, this is what I want. This is what's okay for me, and this is what is not. And to realize how much more that is appreciated and met in the other.
Right. Then it's like an authentic version of you, right?
Absolutely. That clarity, that boundariness, and that authentic coming from a place of power is like, there's an inherent safety with it. Whereas when I might fall back into kind of shadow or small patterns and behaviors and nice guy kind of tropes, there's inherently the person connecting with me, very often my partner, will just feel, this is a bit icky. This doesn't feel nice at all, sort of thing. So I really celebrate and appreciate the work you've kind of shared on that, because it's been it's really helped to bring a few pieces together and go, right, like there's there's a kind of thing that plays out for all of us. And in what we were just our only discussion there about anger, almost like anger seems like the very antithesis of what the nice guy could actually do, healthily, cleanly express anger. Like, no, put it away in the cupboard and don't ever like open that door.
It's like terrifying. Like anger is a threat to your basic needs being met. If anger was like consistently shamed or not allowed to be expressed throughout childhood, then you kind of learn that it's a shameful thing, and then you never really build capacity in the nervous system to actually have an experience yourself while you're like having anger, and then to express it properly and cleanly. Like you say, I like that expression a lot, because it's like, I suppose we seem to tend to want to push it outwards onto somebody else, or push it inwards onto ourselves, like looking for one way or the other. It's got to be somebody's fault, where do I put it, what do I do with it? But really it's more just like having an experience of what that feels like in the nervous system, like kind of letting yourself boil up and like being with yourself and breathing through that experience. And it's quite it's a hard line to like walk down the middle and just have that experience of like anger, clean anger. Like this is just a sensational experience,
This is me, experiencing and being anger. Boom, there's no good or bad attached. Just like, this is what it is, and like, you're right. Absolutely. So, you use the phrase kind of breathe into it there as well. So, from this kind of journey of MMA and that first kind of experiences of beginning to explore and create some boundaries of selfhood and explore who you were and what you wanted to be. If we kind of almost come to now, what have you said? There was, the MMA didn't quite, it wasn't a thing. There was more inner work to do. And so I'd love to hear what you consider to be your journey. And from that, we can use it as a kind of launching off point to kind of dig into some shared fascinations, I've no doubt.
Cool. Okay. Well, I think it was around about, I was living in the Philippines for like 5 years or so. Then I moved to Thailand for a couple of years, and I was in the north in Chiang Mai, and I was starting to get more into like personal development stuff. Me and a couple of friends there, learning little bits about NLP and EFT tapping and energy psychology. And it was actually, it's funny, like the journey with energy psychology began when I was feeling nerves before that fight that you mentioned with the kind of the show-stopping knockout. And my mate who runs Social Anxiety Solutions, he's has quite a big podcast, and he's working with people with social anxiety using EFT tapping, and has a community and everything like that. He did a few sessions with me before the fight, and kind of helped me to clear nerves. And so I remember stepping into the ring and that night and just feeling like, I feel like I should be nervous, but I'm actually not. I just feel calm. I feel it's like I'm looking for something. I feel my body's like looking for, where's the nerves? I'm trying to like get nervous, but it wasn't quite there. And then the knockout happened, and it was like, all right, okay, that was cool. Still not wanting to really pay attention to that little voice. And after that, I think it was when I moved to Thailand. So we started to do more of this personal development stuff, and I started to explore this modality more because it caught my attention. It's like, oh, this is useful. From there, I had a breathwork session. It was like a deep tissue bodywork massage with Kundalini yoga breathwork. So there was rebirthing breath as I was taught it, and breath of fire as well for an hour and a half. And it was really, really intense. Like, I thought I was going to, I don't know where I was for like, after the first 20 minutes, I was just in a completely different space, and, body contorting and like crying and screaming and sweating and getting all of the technique, mouth going like this. And it was just absolutely horrible for like.
That's an initiation for your first ever piece of breath work. You did an hour and a half rebirthing. Choo.
While getting a bodywork massage. So this guy's like elbowing me and all.
Wow, that's a spicy little mix there.
That was a plunge. So that was like a very, very deep initiation. And at the end of it was where I had this, so like the kind of the the download period, as the guy called it. I had this. I mean, I don't really know how to talk about it, but it was kind of like an out of body experience where I was just up in space, looking down on the earth, and just felt completely. It feels weird to talk about it because it's like it's not something I could really describe well with words and hope to get anywhere near what it was like. But it was something else completely. It was very otherworldly,
Yeah.
and I just felt like safe and love and like everything was just fine. And it's like I was information. I don't know how to describe it. Anyway, that kind of rocked my world a little bit, and it took about 3 days to like settle down. I mean, it came back to reality, but it took me a little while of just wandering around thinking, what the hell just happened? That was the weirdest thing I've ever experienced. And then from there, life started to kind of change a little bit, and unravel. So came back to the UK. I tried to keep fighting. I had 3 fights in the space of 5 weeks. I lost. Like, I had this plan. I was going to make money from the fights and then go off to Chile and start a new life. That's always been my thing. It's like I'm looking for the next place to go to start something fantastic and impressive. Anyway, I lost 2 of my fights and I won the 3rd one, but I was really like broken physically, and I didn't have a lot of money. And I had a friend who suggested, just like, hey, I've got this friend who's building mud houses in the Philippines. Why don't you go out and do that? And that little voice piped up again and was like, yeah, go there. That's a good idea. And I didn't really think too much about it, but I just had this sense of like, yeah, good, go with that. It just comes at these opportune times. And so that's what I did. I went out there to build mud houses because I was getting into a bit of construction before. I'd done some work in Thailand with bamboo building, and so this should be fun. I got out there, and the guy who I met was the founder of the inner dance, Pai Vilaraza, this Filipino guy who spent like 2 years on a desert island eating just coconuts and bananas, and had these wild spiritual experiences, and this kind of energy moved through him. He went, after that 2 years, kind of went around the Philippines in the south, like doing healing on people, with this energy that had kind of moved through him through this like super intense cleansing. So like he really went for it. He's really, that's a hell of an initiation. 2 years on a desert island eating coconuts. And so he said, well, if you want to stay here, we want you to do the inner dance teacher training thing, because that's our thing. That's what we do here. And I'm, coming from an MMA background, I was like, yeah, not really, not really my thing. But as soon as I started, it's like, well, what's my options here? I'm going to stay here. I want to learn to build these mud houses. And so it's kind of what I've got to do. And I started doing it. And as soon as I started doing it, I started having these really wild lucid dreams. And I was seeing stuff in my dreams that were just like shapes and colors that looked really, really familiar. Like I didn't know what they were, but it just like felt like kind of a homish type feeling to these shapes and colors. And I just really liked what he was talking about. Like it engaged the part of my brain that was just on it. And I felt like, wow, this is something. I suddenly felt filled with like meaning and purpose, and like I stumbled across something that I hadn't expected. It has still been a challenge to integrate that with the kind of the MMA tough guy personality for a while. And I guess I feel like I've come on the journey since learning about the inner dance and learning like what it is, and then like trying to really understand and fill in the gaps. Like, what is it that I'm experiencing here? And it seems to be like going a bit into somatic theory and more energy psychology stuff, and looking at sleep cycles and brainwave states and all these things just to try to justify, I suppose, to myself, like, why are you doing this weird dancing thing with this cult in the jungle? And it's not a cult. it doesn't have the main characteristics of a cult, but it certainly looks like that from the outside. And people are starting to get a bit worried about me by this point, and saying, we think you shouldn't be hallucinating in the jungle and just come back home. And understandably, but the experiences that I was having was just, it was quite rough, but it was quite alive. Like, it just felt very alive and very like I was stripping parts of myself away, and I was like stepping into something new. And so I had that first wave in the Philippines. Then after 6 months of that madness, was like, I need to do something I need to get back to a city. I need to find my feet again and just ground, and need something dense to like hold on to. And I moved to Taiwan, and I started teaching workshops there. And in other places like Singapore and Malaysia. And I ended up going to Taiwan, living in Taipei. And I started to feel my ego come back into it more. It's like, at first I was just feeling the magic, like manifesting things. Oh, this is just working out perfectly. I'm in the flow. And then after a while, it became like, oh, look at me. I'm doing this thing. Oh, what a splendid chap I am, and all of this. And so it just started to like contract around the whatever that flow thing from the jungle was. And it stopped working. And I remember like one day waking up and thinking, oh God, there was like a moment. I was thinking about like trying to get people to the workshop, and there was this moment when I woke up, and it was like, I just looked at the sun, and I remember seeing the sun streaming through the window and thinking, God, this is absolutely beautiful. And then my mind kicked into gear, and like, remember all the things that you've got to worry about. It just like started up again. And in that moment, that another voice, or that same voice or whatever, was just like, what, this isn't worth it. And I kind of gave it up, really, in that moment. Just like dropped all of the ideas of me doing workshops. And at that point I was like, fuck it, I'm going to be, sorry, can I swear? Is that all right?
Well, I think it's all good. We'll just put a little disclaimer in there.
All right, okay. It's all good. At that point I was like, I'm just going to be a farmer like forever now. I don't want any of this stress or any of this other stuff. And I spent this week feeling absolutely fantastic. Like, all of that worry just fell away. And then just life kind of carried on, really. And I started to get back into boxing, and like tried my hand at that again, and was training hard. And I was just like, honestly, it felt like a grounded thing. It felt like trying to fit into a shoe that was too small. And I think a lot of the time I just felt miserable, like I was trying to be this guy that I was no longer being anymore.
It's a really potent metaphor, trying to fit into a shoe that was too small.
Yeah, I was trying to wear this thing of like, a tough guy thing, and it just wasn't working. And so I had some fairly miserable times with that. I guess that was kind of important for me to go back and take a look at. And then that kind of fell away, and I got invited to do this mission in the Philippines, where it was after the typhoon, so I went with my friend Seb, the social anxiety guy, and we worked with some energy psychology specialists to like help do trauma relief work there for 3 weeks in the Philippines, in Tacloban. And that felt like, okay, I'm coming back to life again. Like, there's some sense of good feeling of what I'm doing here, even though it was like stressful and wild and lots of things. But it just felt like a bit more like, this is kind of where I'm at now. And then after that, I got a call from a friend in Bali and came over. She was sick, and so I came to do some work with her. And at that time, met up with Pai, who happened to be in Bali at the same time, and instantly felt this kind of love of like, oh, this guy and this thing that he's doing. Just, I don't know. I felt like I just wanted to like protect him in this work, and there was a kind of very like a service oriented part that just came alive. And so we got talking again, and he sent me to Nepal to do more in a dance work in Nepal, and that was after the earthquake there. And that was a whole adventure in itself. And it just started to kind of dawn on me more, I suppose, that there's something that I can be doing in this line of work that's quite good and good for me and good for other people. And maybe I should pay attention to that. And I guess I would love to say that I did just pay attention to that, and that was like happily ever after from then. But I think I've been trying to avoid it, to be honest. I think I've been trying to, maybe that's the wrong way to think about it, but I feel like I've been trying to find some sense of ground with it, because it can be very, for myself, like being in that world can be very, very like airy, and it's very difficult to sometimes feel like the ground beneath your feet in it. And I think it's easy for me to get lost in that sometimes, and then start to feel a bit overwhelmed by chaos and like a bit miserable. And I've really appreciated the opportunities that I've had. I went on this really wild journey from Nepal. Hey, so somehow before Nepal, I met the founders of Burning Man in Taipei. My friend was at a TEDx meeting, and he was like, "Oh, come and the founders are doing a little thing here. Do you want to come and meet them?" And I didn't really know much about Burning Man at the time. I met the founders, and some like weird stuff happened where the guy Larry, I think he's passed on now, but he was saying Burning Man's not just about like having a good time. There's also people who do work in disaster zones, and out of this group, he's like saying, as he said disaster zones, he kind of like looked directly at me. I never met this guy before, like and then started talking almost like directly to me, just looking at me. And as he talked about this group, Burners Without Borders, who do work in the disaster zones, and I was like, it's so funny because I'm off to Nepal to a disaster zone tomorrow. And I spoke to him afterwards, said it was so weird how you kind of looked at me and talked about that. And so I kind of got to know him and Marion a little bit, his partner, just through that very small conversation, and emailed them afterwards saying, thanks, it was really inspiring to meet you. And Marion wrote back and said, well, we have 10 free tickets to Burning Man to give away every year. Would you like one? You know, given that you're doing aid work and whatnot. And I was like, great. Yes, please. Okay. I didn't have any money. And then my friend emailed me and said, I just felt this kind of urge to give you some money for the work that you're doing. It's not to be spent in Nepal, but it's just like money to be used to support you. And I was like, God, this is, you know, when things are just like hyper real, and like you're just in this weird place where things fit together in a way that you're just not really it's almost like you can't quite believe it, because it doesn't reconcile properly with any worldview that you've previously
there's no linear logic that accounts for what you're experiencing,
right? And it was just lots of little things like that kind of took me off to the States. And then at that time I was I noticed like my relationship life needed a little bit of work, let's say, generously. And it's like that, I think I was just about ready to go into like a Vipassana center. I'd been doing Vipassana for, I suppose, since 2013 now, and so that was a really stable thing for me. But I was getting ready to go into like a Vipassana center for like 3 months, and just like, okay, my idea was, if I can just clear out all of my problems in this 3 months, then it's kind of like a nice guy paradigm. Then I'll have a problem-free life for,
right. Yeah, pretty sure that's how it works.
Yeah, my remaining years, easy sailing. So I was ready to do that, and ended up not doing that, and got into a relationship with my close friend, like one of my best friends at the time. And that was like a really wild ride, and certainly highlighted so many nice guy patterns and dynamics. It was like quite a brutal look at all of the ways that I'm failing to kind of respect myself and communicate, and all of the things that I thought that I was really good at, but it really just like yanked this nice guy out of this nice guy pattern out of me to be looked at in the raw. And yeah, after that I was like, man, there's so much chaos going on here in the Philippines. I was back in the Philippines at that point. It's like I need to go home. Like I need to find my roots. I need to go and settle or do something normal. And I remember like landing in Denmark from Manila and seeing this grey sky and these very boring square houses and just feeling so just delighted and joyful. Like, oh, this feels so non-threatening, just these red brick houses and grey sky. Then I lived in London for a while and just tried to like do a normal thing. I was working as a chef in a sandwich cafe in Walthamstow. It was like, I just want to do something normal for a while, and I really liked that. Honestly, I really thought that was like the kind of the grounding element that I felt good about. It's like, here's something you do with people, there's nothing mad or spiritual or anything going on like that. It's just like regular people, good sense of humor, having a really good time. And it was really stabilizing in some ways, but it did still feel like I was kind of pushing away a part of myself that like wouldn't really go away. And then I got invited to Switzerland, went to Switzerland to like build this meditation, yoga, inner dance center thing, which was also an adventure. And I guess I've just been like going back and forth and trying to find like where all of that stuff meets the ground, really, and like how I can develop roots with it.
That's the sense I really get from hearing your journey. Just this oscillation between these moments of quote unquote magic, where just things align beyond comprehension.
Yeah.
To then like, okay, I've now got real challenges with relationships and nice guy stuff, and now I'm just this call to work in a sandwich shop. And there's where are you at now with that idea? Because I feel something really important, almost for all of us now, that almost like never before have there been so many narratives clamoring for our attention, and so many, I guess, models being fed to us of how we should behave and operate. And what I really took from what you just shared was these moments where this little voice came in, and invariably when you followed that little voice, kind of magic seemed to unfold, or a next major stage in the journey would unfold and unravel. So where are you at now with this idea, with this kind of almost being able to have that voice as a grounded presence or guide?
Right.
Because that feels important. What your lessons there feel like they might be key to the rest of us, because I feel like never before we need to listen to that voice because it won't guide us wrong. And yet we've never had more challenges with being able to hear it.
Right. Well, it's because it's not always a comfortable voice to listen to. It's like half the time it's telling you something that you wish it wouldn't be saying. And it's like, oh, why don't you rearrange your life? And you're like, come on.
I literally just got my life semi-sorted. Do I have to do that?
Yeah. And it's like, no, go over here. It'll be fine. And you're like, oh, I don't want to do that. I'm all right. Leave me alone. So it can, but I think I've been I think I've been really fortunate in a bunch of ways, but it was after Inner Dance, around 2013, I think it was, I went to, everyone was talking about Vipassana meditation. I was like, that sounds interesting. And I kind of go into these things in the same way I would go into MMA, like, I'm going to smash this Vipassana meditation, just bang out 10 days worth of intense. It doesn't really work like that, but I didn't really know that at the time. And so I was going into it like hard, and it just, and I've had like an on-off relationship with it. And I think now I just find it so valuable, and I do it like almost every day without fail. And I'm not doing it because I'm trying to do it. I'm not trying to be disciplined or like trying to meditate. It's just feels good to like sit down and just do nothing and just let your for me, it's such an anchor to be able to just like listen to the body a little bit. And I just finished an embodiment coaching course, which is talking about a similar thing. You know, it's like pretty much every major embodiment teacher is doing meditation as like a daily grounding thing, and it's not special. Like, it's not this wow type bells and whistles. It's not going to give you the same dopamine rush as you might get off like scrolling through Instagram, but it's just like, okay, just making that baseline a baseline of like peace. Like, I can come back to this space where I know if I sit here for long enough, you know, the water's going to settle and I'll be able to see right to the bottom, instead of like getting involved and swishing it about.
Instead of trying to fit into a shoe that's too small.
Yeah, right. Exactly. It's like, this shoe's got to still fit me. And it's like, well, why don't you go barefoot for a while? Maybe some new shoes will turn up. And that's kind of uncomfortable at first, because then you're walking on stones and you don't really like it. But it does increase your, I mean, for me at least, I'll just speak from my own experience. It's felt like and I'm still not, I wouldn't consider myself like anywhere near an expert on it, but it has definitely increased my sense of connection, I suppose I would use that word, to maybe who I really am. And it's like it's just like shedding layers. You know, I still do like people please sometimes, and I still notice like nice guy traits coming up, but more and more it's just like checking in. It's like, well, how do you feel? You know, what do you need? And I think nonviolent communication was really useful for that as well, because it gave me a framework of actually understanding that, you know, you're working with needs, and usually the feeling that you're feeling, if you can detect that and stay with that, is going to be traced back to some need that's either being met or not being met. And if you can get past the initial hump of the kind of the language that's a bit weird, it's just like a framework really to kind of guide you to needs consciousness or awareness, and feelings consciousness and awareness. And I think it's like a whole bunch of tools have really helped me. I think the communication one has been good, the Vipassana one has been good, and it's like it just gives you a bit of time to like check in and stay like close to yourself. I suppose that's a good way to think about it. It's like I'm close to myself, I'm aware of what's going on and what I'm feeling. I'm able to detect it with more precision. It's like I'm turning up the definition on my ability to understand myself a bit, like I'm more working in HD instead of, I don't know, what's the lower one?
Yeah, like that's another really nice metaphor, that like that that the more you allow the waters to settle, then the clearer you become about your own needs,
right?
And therefore your capacity to live a life that feels like you're living it in like HD, like you say there, versus sometimes like it's like scrambled, and you're getting a kind of choppy, like crackly picture coming in. That's like, because you know, I haven't eaten properly, and I haven't slept properly, and I've taken no time to care for myself, and I've run on adrenaline for the last 3 days, and I'm trying to make good quality decisions and have high quality imaginative thought. It's like the capacity for me to do that in that state versus when I've let the water settle and checked in with what I need. Like they're two diametrically opposed outcomes are very likely there.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, but I don't know. It's like somehow I don't know how a lot of people manage. Like my life seems to be really, I have like time to do this stuff, and I just look at some people's lives and it's like, God, how do you do that with, I mean, you've got kids. I've just no idea how you fit that stuff in around like a few little people that require your attention more or less all the time. And it's like, I think it's so useful to be able to make it I suppose you would be like making it a priority. It's like, okay, if I want to steer this ship in a good way, then I'm going to need to make that self-care a priority, because otherwise I'm just going off the rails, and I'm actually not tuned into myself, which means I'm not really tuned into the people around me. It's like I haven't developed the self-awareness, which means that I'm not perhaps so sensitive to the social awareness and how the people around me are feeling and reacting, responding, and then I guess it just becomes a bit of a mess after that. Which,
yeah, it's certainly an interesting challenge, having two small ones to try and do all this stuff in, and
right.
And actually becomes even more important, like you say, to prioritize it. So, and I'm still a bit rubbish at this quite often, but to prioritize particularly a decent bedtime, so that there's space in the mornings for me to at least, you might get an hour of Vipassana, I might get 20 minutes of some form of journaling or anapana or something in there, but even that can be the difference between a day experienced and executed one way versus a day that happens to me. Right. There's a real different quality, and for me, it can even be as little as like 13 minutes. I've got this 13-minute like barefoot meditation, and just the days when I consistently make time for that, even if I can't do anything else, like the quality of the days, particularly as they stack on top of each other, is markedly different. So we're coming up on time, and it's flown by, and so there's definitely going to have to be a volume 2, because we've barely touched on inner dance or perception architecture, or bounced around conceptions of sovereignty. So, but actually, if I trust that we've shared exactly what needs to be shared, to come to this point of a discussion around prioritizing self-care, like particularly in terms of what is something that you, dear listener, dear watcher, can take forward from this conversation, knowing that there's a really deep and juicy part 2 to come. It feels like now more than ever, like, prioritize your self-care, whatever that looks like for you. It's not a nice additional thing. Oh, if I could. No, like, it's the single most important investment you will make in your own well-being and in your capacity to serve and be loved and be loving. Like, all of those things will start and end with your capacity to care for yourself.
Yeah. So what's my Springer's final thoughts?
Well, I guess, is that where would you stand with that? Is there anything you'd add to that? Because that feels like we've arrived at a place that just, like, if we can anchor that as a takeaway. So is there anything else you kind of like polish that with?
I think it's so valuable. We don't make time to just stop. We're so on it all the time, and it's like nervous system's in hypervigilant mode, and it's like it's very difficult to just stop, and it's very uncomfortable for us to just stop. And so I think taking time, even small amounts of time, to just stop and check in with yourself, how are you doing? Like, really, just like, how are you doing? Are you all right? Can I help you? That kind of thing. Just really basic stuff that you can do for yourself is valuable, because I think, I was listening to something today on the decline of civilizations, and a really nice kind of topic to get into in the morning. But cheerful stuff. But it was all about truth, and people speaking truth is the best defense against tyranny. And I think that idea is starting to become more widespread now, and it's more uncomfortable to do that, but it's just better. And it kind of integrates you and it aligns you. And I think there's the way that you feel from having done some of that. It just kind of pulls you together in a way, or at least that's been my experience with it. And just learning to I don't know, just being all right with yourself. I've done all of these mad things and upset a bunch of people, and I'm obviously deplorable beyond measure, but there's reasons that I've done that. I can't extract myself as this single thing from the environment. There's reasons that I've done that, and they're all adaptations from trauma. And it's just, I think it's a really important awareness to just cultivate and practice.
Beautiful. Well, part 1 in the can, done and dusted.
Indeed.
So Mate, stay there for a second. I'm going to stick a song to play us out. I'll say my goodbyes to folks, and I'll say my goodbyes to you as well as I kind of close down the studio.
Oh, wonderful.
So, brothers and sisters in humanity, that was Tom Woodfin, and so grateful for you guys tuning back in again. And I am now going to hand over to Kaplunk and let you get engaged with the wonderful sounds of Ed. And here we go.